Okay, here we go. So welcome everybody. We are going to start session 3 of this class, From Singleness to Oneness, Embracing the Marriage Designed by God. And we have covered important things on the previous sessions. Just as a very quick review. In the first session, we realized there are different models that people use for marriage. And we ask you, what is the model that you're using? Are you using the partnership model, the 50-50 model, or the oneness model? And we discovered that the oneness model differs completely from the previous two because it's not just a change of relationship, but it's a change of identity. And you need to learn, therefore, to start thinking purple, acting purple, which is something you've never been able to do because until you get married, you've been blue or red, right? You've been single. So the change of identity that requires for this model is very important. So that's the first thing that we discovered in first session. On the second session, which was last time, we realized that as husband and wife come together, they're a team. But the structure of that team differs depending on what model people are using. And we ask you, which structure, therefore, are you using? The macho structure, that thinks that the man is superior to the woman. The feminine structure, that thinks that men and women are the same in every capacity. Or the oneness structure, that thinks that we have equal value but different function. And we realize that at the core, these three different ways of structuring the relationship differ in that dimension. What is the relationship between value and function? So the macho structure said, well, there's different value and different function. The feminine structure said there's equal value and equal function. And the oneness structure said, no, there's different, equal value, but different function. And when we started learning from God's design was that from the beginning, when God created marriage, he created equal value in the relationship. There's no one superior to the other. It's a team that is shared leadership, but the functions that each person brings to that team differ. So that was the second study. And you did the exercises this week. You did the true and false, and then you were able to discover any areas in the relationship that you needed to address, and you fill out the blank space at the end of your notes, identifying what are the areas that need attention and what were the things that you thought needed to be done in order to improve those areas. But we also have given you another section of the notes where we wanted you to see where are you spiritually in relationship to God. So because your understanding of where you are at in that aspect of your relationship is going to directly affect how you build your marriage. So if you have done that, great. If you have not done that, make sure that you do it so that you have clarity in the assessment as you keep building your relationship. And if you have any questions throughout the process, you contact me and we will work together on that stuff. So that's the top review. Today, we're going to start session 3, which is embracing the compass for oneness. And in order to understand what we mean by compass, if you have been in scouting or you like camping, typically you will use a compass to determine direction. Where is the true north, right? And it doesn't matter where you are, you always can look at your compass and it was going to point you accurately where north is. So from that point of reference, then you can make decisions of where do you want to go. If the compass is broken, then it's going to point to any direction and then you become aimless. It's like you think that you're going the right direction, but you are not. It's almost like having a broken GPS system. So the idea of having a compass for oneness is to understand that as you get married and now you have a team of equals in shared leadership that have equal value but different function, now you are going in a certain direction with your marriage. And there are decisions that you will have to make throughout your life. And those decisions are going to be shaped by the compass that you are using. You may not realize that you have a compass, but you have one. And the problem is that if both of you have broken compasses, they're both going to be pointing in complete different directions. And that's where struggle comes into the relationship, because one person says, let's go this way. And the other person says, no, 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 let's go this way. And it's like, okay, which way do we go? So the main idea we're going to learn in this session is that pursuing God's purposes in the world gives marriage depth, meaning, and unity. In other words, what we want to discover in this session is that the ultimate purpose of your marriage is to pursue God's purposes in the world. And when you do that, that's when your marriage begins to experience depth, meaning, and unity that is unique to that compass. So in order to think of these ideas, we are going to then ask this key question: what compass are you using? Now, before we get into the actual content of it, let me take you to 3 different case scenarios. Okay, so as we engage in these 3 case scenarios, you are going to be able to see what do we mean by people having different compasses in how they process information. So let's start with the first one. Case 1, Erica really wants to get a new car, but she knows she cannot afford it. But she knows that driving this new car will make her look more successful, and she wants to look successful for her job. So she's considering different options with her husband. What should she do? Okay, so now you know where she is. She's with her husband talking about it. So what should she do? A, get a new loan, but only pay the minimum monthly payment. B, get a second job, even though she won't see her husband much. C, ask her husband to beg his parents for money. Or D, none of the above. Okay, so let's give Kelly and Jack this option here. So what do you think that they should do from these options?
Probably none of above.
Oh yeah, how come? Why?
I'm just thinking, like, from Erica's perspective, she trying to get a new car, just trying to make her look more successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't quite get it. I know probably some people will do it, but I'm just reading through A, B, and C. It seems like none of that are a good solution. For A, just pay the minimum monthly payment, which is adding more liabilities to their family if they, yeah, and like getting a second job, and will sacrifice time. I think time is also precious, like spending with family. And C, begging, like ask her husband to beg parents for money, which will be something related to session 1. We talk about if we are not independent, like from our original family with our parents, we probably our whole life will have a big impact or influence by the older generations. So it seems like just none of that are a good option for me.
Okay, yeah. So you would tell Erica, maybe you should not get the car. You cannot afford it. The options you're considering, none of them are good. Why does she really want to get the car? What is the driving force behind she wanting to do this?
You could look more successful.
She wants to look successful, right? She wants to look good, you know, and all of these cases that I'm giving you today, they are real case scenarios, okay? They are situations that I have worked with throughout the years with different couples. So Right, you can see that in this case, what is driving her mindset is, I want to look successful, therefore I'm going to get the car. The problem is that I met Erica, which is not her real name, after she had bought the car, and in the middle of financial troubles and in a marriage that is experiencing lots of tensions, right? So it's like you look back and you say, wow, that was a bad decision. But why did they make that decision as a couple? Well, because they were using a compass. But you can tell by the options that compass was not good. It was not pointing to the true north. Now let's go to case 2. This is also real case scenarios. Now case 2, it's a little bit different. That has to do with sexual life and marriage, okay? So case 2 says, Jason wants to spice up his sex life with his wife. What should he do? Now remember, these are real case scenarios, and we are trying to see what are people thinking and what is driving their decisions, okay? So option A, Jason should invite his wife to watch porn videos together. B, Jason should find another couple interested in exchanging sex partners. C, Jason should ask his wife to have sex with a friend while Jason watches them. D, none of the above. Okay, so Brandon and Hannah, what do you think Jason should do?
Well, I think this one is pretty straightforward. Anna, you want to answer this one?
No, you go ahead. And you answer.
There's probably a lot of other options here, but I'll go with D, none of the above.
Yeah, okay. So why do you think that D, none of the above?
Well, for me, these are all things that, well, I don't want to sound judgmental or high and mighty or whatever, but stuff that like wouldn't cross my mind. It's like, I'm in it with my partner, and none of these things really have anything to do with the partner. It's all just about Jason.
Okay, so it's self-centered.
It's
Is that
totally
you're saying?
self-centered, yeah.
Jason, this is about you satisfying your lust, and you are using your wife for things like you shouldn't. But Jason has a compass, you see. These are his legitimate options that he's really thinking. These are things that he could do. And as you can see, that's a broken compass, because none of those things, would say are conducive for the marriage or based on love or even sexually moral. But I have worked with two different couples, which all these 3 options have been part of their lives. And needless to say, I'm working with them because they're in crisis, right? And some of the marriages get to places that are very, very wounded. And when you look back, you say, well, that decision you made there was a very wrong decision. And you are experiencing now the domino effect of those decisions in your marriage. But what do you see is that this is another couple that is facing a situation in the marriage, and they're using a compass. They're using some kind of point of reference to make a decision. And in their mind, their decision is a good decision, when in reality, it's not. Let's go to case 3. Case 3, Mark wants to make sure his kids are happy. So he likes to buy them everything they want, including expensive toys, electronics, and name brand clothing. Bills are accumulating, and Mark and his wife are not sure what to do next. So what should they do? A, get a 10th credit card, paying the minimum in all 10 cards. B, borrow money from his in-laws to maintain the expensive lifestyle. C, get a second job, limiting the time he can spend with his kids. D, none of the above. Eli, let's see you guys. What do you think?
That's gonna be none of the above.
How come?
Because it's not financially wise to continue to buy things that are unneeded, especially when you're not actually paying for them with money you have.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So you are borrowing to pay for a lifestyle you cannot afford, but Mark wants the kids to be happy. So if he stops buying them the expensive toys and the brand name brand clothing and all that stuff, then they're not gonna be happy. So what should he do?
You should teach a lesson on where happiness comes from. I think he should
Okay.
probably spend some more time with his wife and his kids and work on like explaining how what you already have can do the same thing, and how clothes, don't need to look the best and don't have to be the highest quality to be good clothes and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So there's an aspect here that you are pointing out. Say, Mark, you need to learn what true happiness is about, because it seems to me that you are defining happiness by stuff that you get. And if that's what you're teaching your kids, then you are not teaching them what happiness truly is. So this is more than just living beyond your means, right? It's about thinking that having stuff defines your happiness. So again, Mark in this case has a broken compass, and that's what he's been doing. And on the outside, he's a successful man. He makes lots of money, but he is making money that he is spending in all of this stuff because they want to keep the kids happy, meaning we want to give them all this material stuff. And what they're teaching the kids is that materialism is the path for happiness. So they're doing a disservice to the kids. They just do not know it until it's too late. Because later, when the kids grow up, the dad was not much present with them because he was working all the time. And now they're distant. And now the dad is wondering, why are my kids so distant from me if I provided all these things for them all the time? Little did he understand that what they truly needed was him, not the stuff that he could give them. So what you can see in all of these three cases is that when we ask, what compass are you using? Each couple comes to marriage with a compass. And the problem is that when you have two different compasses, and even worse, when both of them are broken. So if there is some kind of criteria that helps us define the true north in all of these decisions, if you could say none of the above in all of those three, is that you are using a compass to decide what are those the criteria for making the right decision in all those three. So where does the compass come from, and what are those different compasses that people use? So I'm going to contrast these three compasses that are the three most common compasses that people use in marriage. The first one is the happiness compass. Okay, so the happiness compass is like this. Can you still see the screen? Okay, the slide. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the happiness compass, when this person gets married, this person is getting married to be happy. That's what the person is thinking. The person thinks that singleness is not satisfying anymore, but the pursuit of marriage brings with it the promise of, happy ever after. So the person is thinking marriage is conceived as a step closer to happiness. It will give me, good company, fun, romance, good sex, cute, healthy little babies, among other things. Normally, this person is not anticipating that marriage is going to be difficult. Instead, the person is expecting that marriage is going to make life more enjoyable. So when the ideal marriage that this person has in mind is replaced with the real marriage, then happiness, or the idea of happiness, is lost in that process. And because the person doesn't realize the impossibility of an ideal marriage where everything is so nice and cute and we lovey-lovey all the time, then that person will end up divorcing when no longer feels happy in the marriage, and will divorce in order to find another spouse that will make him happy. And this person that is using the happiness compass is thinking that happiness is an emotion, something that makes me feel good. And the things that make me feel good are the things that I want to be seeking. And when I don't get them, I just get rid of you and find somebody else. That is the happiness compass. And once again, the problem with that compass is that the person is not thinking that marriage is going to be hard work, and that it's going to, in many moments, not make her or make him feel happy at all. There's going to be struggles by the person because he's not thinking about that. When the person faces those moments, is not equipped to survive and thrive through that marriage. That's a broken compass. They are defining happiness with the wrong terms. Secondly, the second compass is what I call the success compass. Now, the success compass is a little bit different because the person using this compass is thinking of marriage as a means to achieve an affluent, successful life. So this person thinks that singleness is not as valuable as marriage because two people can accomplish more than one. The pursuit of marriage will bring with it the promise of a bigger and better life, especially if you live in Texas, right? Bigger and better. But marriage is conceived as a step closer to success. It will provide more money, more social influence, more power to acquire things, more opportunities for achievement, among many other things. So if marriage does not lead me to that desired picture of success, then I'm going to end up divorcing you because that's not what I signed up for. Therefore, I'm going to find another spouse that will lead me to that successful life. So typically, this person is not just going to marry anybody. This person is thinking, okay, what is your career? How much money do you make? You know, what is your circle of influence? Because what's your family life? Because I want to make sure that I'm inserting my life into a life with someone that has already that affluence or that successful potential. So you see these two different compasses are looking for something that the spouse is going to give me in order to make my life get to the place I envision it should be. And both of them are thinking of the spouse as almost, in a sense, almost like a stepping stone to get where they want to get to. In both cases, it is very common then to get divorced, not only one time, but perhaps 2 times or 3 times. Why? Because every time that they get into the relationship, they get into the relationship with that mindset that I'm here for you to take me where I want to be. If you don't take me there, I'll find somebody else. And they never realize until perhaps they're in their 3rd or 4th marriage that their perspective or their compass they were using was wrong. So these two compasses are very common, more than what we realize. That's why today the rate of divorce is the highest it's ever been. There are more couples that get divorced than couples that remain married. So there's a third compass that is completely different from these two compasses. And this is the compass that we are using in oneness. This compass is called the service compass. What does that mean? Well, this perspective is radically different from the other two, because the person using this compass thinks that singleness and marriage are equal opportunities to live a life that serves God. So getting married is not going to change that. The compass is the same. However, the desire for companionship, the desire for financial stability in marriage are still there, but they are not the goal. They're simply means to the same unchanging goal, which is to serve God with our lives. So marriage brings new opportunities to serve God. It brings opportunities like a companion to love and serve, children to raise in the knowledge and love of God, two lives with more financial means and more giftedness to invest in God's purposes. So people that use the service compass do not see divorce as an option in their marriage because they're not using each other for their own goals. They are working, serving together for God's purposes. See the difference? Once you see these three compasses, therefore, what you realize is that the first two compasses are very self-centered. I'm using the spouse I married for my goals. While the third one is not self-centered, is God-centered. I'm living my life and we are serving together to fulfill God's purposes. And that's why the service compass brings depth, meaning, and also unity to marriage. But when I have the other two compasses instead, meaning is replaced with meaninglessness, and unity is replaced with struggle and tension. And the whole idea of just depth is replaced with superficiality. And those are the marriages where many people are today: superficial, aimless, and completely just selfish. So no surprise there that they end up divorcing. So what we need to discover in this session is, what does the service compass look like and what is the biblical foundation for it? Because again, what we're going to do in this study is that we're going to take a look at what the Bible says about God's design for marriage and how this structure works. But before we do that, I would like to take you to 1 John chapter 2, which is going to give us kind of like the framework for this mindset of the service compass. This is one of the followers of Jesus, one of the apostles of Jesus that worked with him when Jesus was on earth, before Jesus died and resurrected and ascended to heaven. When Jesus was doing his ministry on earth, he had 12 apostles, and one of them was called John. John eventually was the one that wrote the book of John. He wrote 3 letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and he wrote the book of Revelation. All of those books are in the Bible. So in that first letter that he wrote, called 1st John, he is talking to people just like you and me. And he tells them these words. It's a warning, almost like a strong advice, but also the reason for the advice. And this is what he says: do not love this world nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of God the Father in you. So first, what is the advice? He says, do not love the world or the things this world is offering you. Why? Because that love for these things is not compatible with loving God. It's one or the other, okay? And loving, I know that in English we use the word love in so many different ways. You know, you love your spouse and also you love, you know, tacos or hamburgers. And it's like, well, we don't mean the same in both times. We say, well, I love my hamburger and I love you. You know, we don't mean the same, but it's the same word, right? Well, here, the idea of love is what's driving you. What is the motivation that drives you to pursue what you are pursuing? That's the idea of loving here. Is do not let your affections be set on these things. Instead, let your affections, what drives you, what you pursue, be defined by your love for God rather than your love for the things the world offers. And then in verse 16, is going to tell us what is that he means when he talks about what the world offers. It's going to tell us 3 things. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. So those three things. And he says the problem with these three things is that these are not from God, the Father. They're just from this world. So that's the first problem. These things were not God's idea. These are the world's idea. And secondly, he tells us the other problem is that this world is fading away along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. So here the Apostle John tells people like you and me that we are being driven by something. And he says, make sure that you're not driven in your life by these three things. The pursuit just for physical pleasure, the pursuit for materialism, the desire to acquire what you see, and the pursuit of building your reputation and your self-image so that other people will respect you. Because these three things, he says, fade, they pass away. And then he also says that in contrast to be driven by that, what should drive our lives is the desire to do what pleases God, to pursue God's will, to pursue his purposes, because those are eternal. Now, I remember that the last time I bought my camera, because I like, photography, I had bought a camera that was just so nice, and then only to discover, like a year later, that the camera was outdated and didn't have the latest technology anymore. So I wasn't as excited about it anymore. It's like I wanted the other camera now. And then cell phone came with all this camera equipment, built in now, and iPhones. You see iPhone 12, which is the one that is out there now. It's like, oh, I would love to have that iPhone. It just has everything I've ever dreamed of. And you go and buy it, and 5 months later, it's like you're no longer excited about the one you bought. Why? Because the new one that came out is even better. And you look at the one you have, it's like, oh, this is not nice anymore. I really want that one, because if I get that one, that will really make me happy. And that is what John is saying here. You realize how every time that you try to pursue those things, they lure you with the promise of, if you get me, you will be happy. So you go and you get it, and that happiness lasts for how long? A short time, fades away. But he says, when you pursue what makes God happy, that lasts. So this is very revealing, because what John is telling us is that we live driven by something. There's something we are pursuing, but that which we are pursuing is not necessarily something that we should be pursuing, because maybe we're investing our lives and energy and everything in these things that are just passing away, and they are just like sandcastles. They have the appearance of a castle, but the water comes and it just collapses. So this is very important, because it gives us a framework of understanding that there are two competing mindsets. One is very temporal, in focusing on the here and now and what I think will make me happy, but is passing. While on the other hand, you have things that matter the most, and they have a much more lasting impact, and they are linked to understanding what is God's will, what are God's purposes, what he desires. And this is the shift that we start making in our oneness compass. We switch from pursuing these temporary things as what drives us, and we start making the shift to pursuing the things that are important to God. And we are going to discover later in the study 3 things that are important to God, that God desires for your marriage to experience. But before we look at those three things that will define this oneness compass for your marriage, I want to share with you the story of a man that will tell us his story of how he dealt with these different dynamics in his own life. But as you picture these three things, I want you to look at them from this perspective, okay, with this graphic, just to summarize them. When we are saying, what compass are you using? We are asking you, what drives your marriage? What is driving your relationship? And if we put these things that John told us together, will be this: seeking pleasure. That is what Jason was seeking, wasn't he? When he wanted to spice up his relationship, and all the options that he was thinking about were completely out there. Well, because he was using this mindset, you see. The next one, materialism. And that is what Erica was looking for by the car that she wanted to get, and that Mark was looking for by making his kids happy with giving them stuff. And image, that's what actually Erica was more concerned about. It will make me look successful, you see. But John says, no, instead of letting those things drive you, make sure that it's the pursuit of God's will that drives you. So let me go to this story from Lee Yi that he's going to share with us his life experience. And after he tells us his life experience, I want you to tell me what was driving his life and what made the switch in his life. Because you will see that he was on one side as he pursued what was driving his life. And then at some point that shifted. And that did not mean that he did not become successful. You will discover he did, but it was completely redefined. So pay attention to his story, and then you will let me know what was driving him and how did that change. So give me 1 second, because in order to make the switch here for you to see it, I need to make a couple of changes. First, I need to switch from headphones to the speaker. So give me a second. Okay, can you hear me okay still? Go like that? Okay, good. So I'm gonna also start here the video for you to be able to see it.
Been since.
Give me a second. Okay, here we go.
My dream has always been, since coming out of the womb, is to be rich and successful, because it was everything we didn't have. I'm a product of date rape, and my father deserted us. Grew up in a single-family home before that was fashionable in America. I had no supervision, no father image. I really was rebellious. By the time I was 15, I was out of the house. I got shipped to Taiwan, ostensibly so I could learn Chinese, because I told my mother over and over I hated Chinese, I hated to be Chinese. I told her I wanted to be white. In Mount Joy, Iowa, there were no other Chinese people. And I wanted to, so much I wanted to fit in. And basically I had no identity. So here I am in Taiwan. And now I got worse problems, because where I felt so Chinese in Iowa and so foreign and not fitting in, now I'm really not fitting in, because I am in China and I am so American. I got snookered into going to a Baptist youth camp in Taiwan, and I heard about Jesus in a different way. And I just heard the basic message. Jesus loves me, and he has a plan for me, and I mean, I was just a sucker for love. You know, I remember standing up and say, I want to become a Christian. I just, you know, who wouldn't want to be a Christian? Basically at that camp. So I just went along with the crowd as usual. And as soon as I got home to the United States, of course, I forgot everything about it. And then went to UCLA, joined the Jewish fraternity, and I remember that in the middle of the 60s, a guy named Hal Lindsey came to town, and he converted 3 of our fraternity brothers out of a Jewish fraternity. And they all joined in and making fun of them and ridiculing them. And to my shame, I joined in that. But I knew in my heart that there was something real. And if these guys that we respected, who were Jewish, would accept this Jesus as their Messiah, you know, I mean, for me to ridicule that, to join the crowd and to be basically ashamed, and not to mention that I actually had an experience with him myself when I was 15. That was an embarrassment. To make a long story short, I crammed 4 years into 5, got into trouble with the draft, joined ROTC. Before I knew it, I was in Gießen, Germany on a missile site, watching the East German border in case the Russians ever attacked us, pulling 24-hour duty. And of course, that kind of got old after a while because Russians never did come. Here I am in Gießen, Germany, no meaning to my life, just a loser, just not functioning in life. All the guys in Germany were back from Vietnam. Here they are talking about killing gooks and I'm looking in the mirror saying, wait a minute, I think I'm a gook to these guys. It could not fit in. So I got real alienated. I'm stoned all the time. And now my wife's leaving me. And I was just at the low point in my life. That's when a couple named June and David Otis, they were Department of Defense civilians, and they picked us up. And what I mean by picking us up, they just became our friends. We had no friends. Invited us to their home and just shared their lives with us. One night over dinner, my wife says, why are you guys so different from other people? Why are we different? Well, we have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And they just started talking about it as if it was like a friend or a college buddy or somebody that was living next door. And so my wife got so interested. And, you know, I started to see her life change. We were no longer fighting. She was looking at me differently. And it was just inevitable. I just capitulated. And I think, as I think about that time, I just remember being in a coffee house downtown Gießen. And there were candles on the table, and there was just so much love in the room. And I just felt the love of God. It was so strong, and it just overwhelmed me. I went home. I just went home that night, and I said, you know, I'm just really not proud of what I am, and I just need help. I mean, I just don't know how to live. I just don't know how to live properly. I don't know how to function in this job. And if you're out there, and I think if you love me, I'd like to be included. I'd like to be, I don't know if I understood his family stuff, but I mean, I don't know if I really understood him as a father, but I really wanted him. As the Christians say, I think I accepted him. I think it's a joke, me accepting him. I think I was asking him to accept me. I think that was what it really was. It's amazing what happened. I don't know, you can't explain it. Just the world looked different. I knew I was a new creature. Anyway, my life went straight up. I mean, it was weird. Then I got a job at Goldman Sachs. I made so much money that I achieved my dream. I achieved what I was just hoping to, but I knew that this was not what life was to be about. I mean, I had everything. And that's what I had to learn. We have to fill this void, this God-shaped void. You can't just be happy with materialism. It doesn't satisfy you. You know, there's just countless stories about guys who have given up their lives to follow Jesus. And that is the secret of life. When you put your life down, when you say you're second, when you let go and take his life, that is when you find it. I've always thought I always knew better. That's my life story, but it's just great to really think that your friend actually knows better than you. It's better to even go as counterintuitive sometimes. It's better to follow. And I think the word follow is what I do. My name is Lee Yee, and I am second.
Okay, so what was driving Li Yi from birth, as he says? One second, I want to switch. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay, good. So unmute your mic and tell me what you get from his experience. What was driving him? How he felt about what was driving him? What did he discover along the way in his journey? So what did you get?
He was being driven by success at the beginning, I think.
The desire to get rich and make money.
He was doing okay in his career, yeah. But it really sounded like that time, to me in his story, it sounded like that time at college actually had a pretty profound effect on him when he was in the Jewish fraternity, and how Lindsay came and converted 3 of his brothers to Christianity, but taking part in the ridicule of that, I think, probably had a pretty lasting impact on him going forward, but didn't really think about it for years and years and years until he kind of hit rock bottom with his life.
Yeah, and at that point, when the marriage is in crisis, right? What we know from the story, he says is like, I was just pursuing these things, you know, and yet how was his marriage? Terrible, right? What started changing in the marriage?
I think he mentioned something about his wife was ready to leave him.
And what started changing the dynamics between them?
Oh, sitting down with their friends at dinner, having the conversation with Judy and Dave.
Yeah, so the friends, he says, they were different. They could tell they were different. It's like, why are you different? You know, what is the secret sauce kind of thing, right? And to his surprise, they simply said, oh, we have a relationship with Jesus, you know, and that brought him back to all his other memories, right? So what's interesting is that until that point, he had been kind of religious, right? He knew a little here, there, he did that, but he didn't really understand much. And the lack of understanding was translated into his dysfunctional marriage and life and what he was trying to do. But at that point, he says that he got to the point in which he addresses God now. And what is that he desires at that moment in his connection with God?
Is he asking a question?
He just want to be loved.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he found from his friends that there is God out there that willing to love and give him love. So that's why that drives him to
Yeah. So
seek
he
for
experienced that love from God, and he says it's hard to explain. It just, he says you start seeing the world differently, and it's like I was a new creation, like a new creature. It's just there was a change in him, and at that moment, why do you think that he ends the video saying I am second?
I think for the whole time before he found believing in Jesus, he was trying to fit in. Like he wanted to be white, but then he wasn't white, and then he couldn't fit in with the Chinese because he's so American. So he just was trying to find himself, and I think that it's all about him, that who he wants to be and what he wants to do. So now he said I'm second. It means he put in God before all those needs that he had before. So I think that's what he meant.
Yeah, that's a very good summary. So until this point, he was first, right? He was trying to fit in. He was trying to find his identity in all of these different things, and he said there was a void, and it's like a God-shaped void, right? And but then when he made God first, suddenly that peace, that sense of identity, and then that freedom to actually pursue his job, and he succeeded at it, but no longer was the goal of his life, because now God was first in his life. So that's why his story is so powerful, because it shows what is something common to all of us. Because what we just read in the book of First John is that we live in the world, and the world pursues these things, so we do too, because we want to fit in. But John says, but that is not from God, and that's not going to lead you anywhere. It's just passing. But if you learn to discover this relationship with God and you pursue his will instead, now you are going to experience that sense of purpose and depth that you've been lacking. So this is very important to all of us, no matter at what stage we're in marriage, because typically most couples, when they're going to get married, the first initial concerns are financial ones. What are going to be our jobs? How are we going to pay the bills? We need to buy the house, the American dream, right? We want to have the house, we want to have the cars, we want to have the job. And then retirement, right? So it's like we want to retire young and we want to have good retirement. So suddenly all of the effort is pointing in that direction of living our lives for that which is temporal, and we may not realize it. So what I want you to start thinking in this session, by bringing what the Apostle John said in First John and hearing Li Yi's story, so what I want to bring to you is that, to your attention, is that you need to start thinking, what are you pursuing with your relationship? What is that you are going to be driven by as you get married, or you are already married, building that relationship? Where are you going? What are you pursuing? So in order to help you discern that, we're going to take a look at 3 different passages from the Bible. And in this section, I want to make sure that as we go through them, it's very, very precise. I don't want to spend a lot of time in them, but I want to introduce you to them just to give you a framework of what does this look like. So we're going to be moving from a self-centered compass that is always thinking, what do I want, to a God-centered compass that is asking, what does God want? What pleases him? And when we make that shift, suddenly we start thinking differently, and the decisions we make are completely differently. So what is God's will for my marriage? The first thing that God desires for you to experience in your marriage is to develop godly character. That's one of the first things that you need to understand, because God will use marriage to help you grow in character like no other relationship you've ever experienced. So think, for instance, of a good friendship that you had that eventually turned the wrong way and you ended up not being friends anymore. Do any of you have someone like that in your life, that you were good friends, but then things happen and then you no longer were friends? Raise your hand so I can see. Right? Okay. Yeah. So, right, when we have friendships, people betray us, do things. Okay, we're no longer friends. But once you're married, it's a different story. When you are married and you are in that kind of relationship, and if you are not thinking of divorce as an option, then you are in a context that is not so easy to get out. And you have to face certain things that God will start using to shape you so that you grow in godly character. And for that, let's take a look at what the Apostle Peter, one of the other apostles, very close to John, wrote to couples, people that were married. So this is going to be 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 9. He starts tagging to wives, and he tells them, in the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husbands. Then, if some refuse to obey the good news, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. They will be won over by observing your pure and reverent lives. Don't be concerned about the outward beauty of fancy hairstyles, expensive jewelry, or beautiful clothes. You should clothe yourself instead with the beauty that comes from within, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God. So you pay attention. See, what he's telling the wife is, look, the world is going to tell you that the most important thing is what you look like. What's your hairstyle? What are the clothes you're wearing? You know, how thin you are. You need to look good. That's what the world will emphasize. He says, but not you. If you are using the service compass that is pursuing God's will, you're going to be thinking differently. What you need to emphasize is the beauty from within. He's not saying do not take care of yourself. He's saying don't make that the goal. Make sure that your beauty is from your character, your godliness, your spirit, the way you are, not the way you look. One of the things I tell my daughter, Lucia, I tell her, you're my beautiful, you know, all the time. She hears it like 100 times a day, oh, my beautiful. But many times I have to remind her, what makes you beautiful? Your looks or the way you act? So the way I act. Okay, I want her to remember that, because that is character. And that's the first thing he tells wives. So see how he's emphasizing the character side. Look at now how he addresses the guys, the husbands. He says in verse 7, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Treat them with respect as a delicate vessel and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Look at what he emphasizes again. He doesn't say, your looks are the most important thing, or how much money you are making, or the house you live in. He says, no, make sure that you treat your wife with consideration, respect them, be gracious with them, and pray, right? Pray for them, but treat them as an heir, as an equal, not as an inferior. See? So he's emphasizing again how you are interacting, your character, the godliness. And then he finishes in the last part, talking to both of them. And look at these words. Look at the words in this section. He says, finally, all of you should be of one mind, right? Having unity. Sympathize with each other. Love each other. Be tenderhearted and keep a humble attitude. Don't repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. That is what God has called you to do, and he will grant you a blessing. So look at how he is defining the relationship. He's saying the way you interact with each other. If your spouse mistreats you, what should you do? Yell back? No. He's emphasizing the aspect of character because he ends the last part saying, this is what God has called you to do. You see, what is God's desire for the way we interact in our relationship? Is that we grow in godly character. And this is where marriage is going to push you to have to grow in character like you never had before. You will have to learn to be humble and say, I'm sorry, it was my mistake. You were right. That's hard to say, isn't it? You will have to learn to say, I forgive you, even though it really hurt you. You will have to learn to give in to other things and other needs that are not yours. All of these different things that marriage is going to push you to, God wants to use to help you grow in character. Why is this so important to understand? Because remember in the happiness compass, what happens if I'm not happy with you anymore? What happens if I'm hurt with you now and I don't like you anymore? What do? I divorce you. I find another person. You see, that person is not thinking that God wants to use marriage to help me grow in godliness. But God will use that in your relationship. That is God's will. That's something that he desires for you. Now, just as a footnote, I'm not saying that you need to stay in a relationship that is abusive, because that's a whole different story, okay? And we'll talk about that in a whole different session later. But I am talking about what is within the acceptable, the normal interactions. So you see the emphasis? Here the emphasis in make sure that you understand that as you get married, God is going to use that relationship to help you grow in character, in all of these things that otherwise will be dormant there in your life. So how does God want to use marriage in your life? To help you develop godly character. And as you grow in that, you are doing what pleases God. The second thing that God talks about is that he designed marriage to be the context in which we can develop godly offspring. And there's a passage in the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible, where God gave an important set of messages to this man called Malachi. He wrote a whole book to confront the nation, because the nation at that time was people were being unfaithful in their marriages, and they were divorcing so quickly and so easily. And God uses Malachi to tell them, not so quickly. That's not what I designed marriage for. And he tells them in verse 15. Can you read it out loud with me where you are? You don't need to unmute your mic, but read it out loud from where you are. Has not the Lord made them one? In flesh and spirit, they are his. And why one? Because he was seeking godly offspring. So guide yourself and your spirit, and do not break faith with the wife of your youth. What is the argument that Malachi tells these couples that are getting divorced so quickly? Why shouldn't they get divorced so quickly, he says. Who designed marriage? God. And he designed them to be one, right? He says. But why one? Why did God design them to come together in this context of marriage? What was he seeking as an outcome of that? What does Malachi say? You see it? Right. He says there because he was seeking godly offspring. That's very important because God designed marriage to be the place in which we can raise offspring, but offspring that is godly offspring. In other words, the goal of me as a parent in my marriage is not to make my children happy. That's not my goal. My goal is to teach my children to be godly. My goal is to teach my children to love God. That's my goal. Because when I teach them to love God and they start loving God with their lives, guess what they're going to experience along the way? They're going to be happy. You see? So the goal of us when we get married, if God blesses you with children, is that as you have the children God entrusted you with, you will teach them to love God because that's what he was seeking. He was seeking godly offspring, not just offspring. Does that make sense? So one of the mistakes, like we saw in the case studies with Mark that wanted to buy everything for the kids because he wanted them to be happy, he was willing to get in debt and make all these financial decisions that were not sound. Why? Because he thought that his goal as a father was to make sure his kids were happy. And he translated happiness as giving them stuff. And he never realized that actually that's not what God wanted. God wanted that Mark would teach his children to love God because when they do so, then they experience true happiness. So that's the second thing that God wants to use your marriage for. That's why some couples that struggle having children and they cannot have children, they say, you know what? I would like to adopt because I want to have an environment in which I can use our marriage to give the opportunity for these children to experience God's love and to learn to love God. And they do that as a way of serving that life, as a way of serving God with their marriage. So that's very interesting. Let's go to the third one and last one. God wants to use your marriage so that you can serve God in a new depth, in a like expanded influence. Because think of it this way: if I by myself, I have only my giftedness, but when I marry somebody, now we have two people with giftedness in different areas. And if we team up with all that giftedness to pursue God's purposes, now we have more gifts, more abilities, more resources to pursue God's purposes than if I was just by myself. God desires that you will experience in your marriage a team where you will combine that giftedness to pursue his purposes. And that's why we find that the Apostle Peter, again in 1 Peter 4:10, tells us this: each one should use whatever gift he has received to do what? To serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. This is very important because what he's saying is, look, do you have giftedness? Do you have abilities? What are you good at? And you can start telling me, well, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I'm good at this. Well, do you know who gave you that ability? God says, I gave you that ability. I gave you those gifts. And I want you to use those gifts for what purpose? To serve others. See? So when we come together with our giftings and abilities, and we use that combined ability to serve God by serving others, suddenly that starts bringing unity and depth to your relationship. But if you notice with the happiness compass and with the success compass, what this person desires to do is to use their giftedness and abilities to serve themselves, to serve their purposes. They are not thinking at all in making an impact in other people's lives. So that's why this third part of what God desires to do is so important. And if you are a follower of Jesus, the Bible says that one day you and I will have to give an account to him for what we did with the gifts he gave us. So that even adds a sense of accountability, to what God will do with us. But can you see that when we talk about the oneness compass or the service compass, it's summarized in these three different areas. God wants to use your marriage to help you develop godly character. A marriage is going to test you like nothing before. You're going to learn patience, compassion, forgiveness like you never had before. And when you learn those things, you become a much solid person. But if instead you think that the defects in your spouse are a reason to walk away, then you are not understanding that God wants to use your marriage to shape you into godly character. So don't walk away just because you're not happy. Instead, ask God how he can use the crisis you're in to help you grow in godliness. The second thing is develop godly offspring. Our goal as parents is to create an environment where our children can learn to love God, because when they discover that, they experience true happiness. Happiness is not the goal. Happiness is the outcome of the goal, which is learning to love God. That's why one of the things that we do at home with the kids all the time, when we are correcting them or confronting them with something, I have to remind them. And I said, look, in our family, we love God. That's why we do this. And that's why what you're doing is wrong, because God says that that's wrong. See, I want them to think in those terms, because one day I'm going to be gone. And if they don't have that compass already built in, they're going to be driven by fear instead of love. So that's why developing godly offspring is so important, but also serving God with our gifts. The abilities and resources God has given us, we mix them together to create something powerful that God can use so that we can serve others. These three areas come together in a powerful way that when you use your marriage to serve God and pursue God's purposes, your marriage now starts experiencing a new depth, a new meaning, and the ability now to give you a sense of unity that before was completely lacking. So what compass are you using? You see how important it is to ask that question and to answer it? Now, I would like to finish this session by showing you a quick video. This is an animation video, because so far what I've shown you is the biblical foundation of saying, look, in summary, it's like you're not living for yourself. You need to live to serve God. You're living for making an impact outside yourself. And what is interesting is that in the science field, with all the development now on brain science, they have discovered, and now people are going to say in these terms, you are wired for kindness, or you are wired for generosity. Your brain was designed for altruism, and they tell you all these things. What do they mean? What you're going to discover is that what God is telling you is actually going to benefit you as a side effect in ways that are even beyond what we had understood or imagined before. So let me show you that quick animation, and then let me switch first the audio so that you can hear it. So 1 second. And here. Okay, so here we go. Pay attention and then tell me what is that the video showed you.
Sometimes it's easy to feel like the world's getting harder. But if we look closer, on the news, on the web, on the street, we're anything but unkind. Every day, we hear new stories of people trying to make the world a better place. And together, we can make the world that little bit kinder for all of us. It all starts with just one person, you. The thing about kindness is that it's just about the only thing in the world that doubles when you share it. And it's a fact, backed by science. Studies have shown that if you perform just one random act of kindness a day, you'll not only reduce your stress, anxiety, and depression, but your body is flooded with the same hormones that make you and the person you've helped calmer, healthier, and happier. Serotonin, which heals your wounds, helps you relax and makes you feel good. Endorphins, which reduce pain. And oxytocin, which reduces blood pressure and makes you feel more loving and loved. You'll both be more energized, feel less aches and pains, more confident, and could even live longer. And if other people see you helping someone else, they'll be filled with those same feel-good hormones, meaning they're significantly more likely to pay it forward. Like taking that extra moment to hold the elevator for someone, spotting a coffee for a stranger who's just a few cents short, giving your neighbor a hand with their groceries, even just smiling and meaning it. It doesn't take much, but it can make a huge difference for everyone. Those people you've helped will help other people, and those other people will help even more people. And those random acts of kindness can start a chain reaction that can spread across an entire community, a city, a country, and with enough of us, the world. Now, isn't that the world we all want? And it all starts with one.
Okay, so you discover that your brain releases hormones that makes your body experience certain things that are actually beneficial for your health and for your well-being. So this is where we say that happiness is a side effect of using the service compass. See, by making God the priority and pursuing his purposes with your marriage, suddenly you will start experiencing that which you wanted from the very beginning. The problem was that many couples think that that was the goal rather than the outcome. The goal is pursuing God's purposes, because when we make the pursuit of God's purposes our priority in our marriage, then our marriage experiences depth, experiences meaning, and experiences unity. So with that, I'll conclude this session. I'm going to conclude the recording as well with the question, which compass are you using? Happiness, success, or service compass? So I hope that you enjoy this session. Let me start recording and join us for the next session if you were not able to do this time. So